Hi, I'm Brian Moran, and today I want to talk to you about your thinking and give you a framework to help you understand the power of your thinking, and then also work with you a little bit on maybe where your thinking is unproductive, how to shift that. So, everything we do at the 12-week year is designed to help you get more of what you want faster. And by the way, if you like this stuff, check us out at 12weekyear.com. But I'm going to share with you this framework. So, we're talking about results. And that's what we're after. Better outcomes, better results in any area of our life, whether it's our business, our income, our health, our relationships, whatever. The question I have for you, and the question I often ask from stage, is what do you have to do to produce any kind of result? Right? At the most basic level, what do you have to do to produce a result? And I think if you really give it some thought, you might come up with a bunch of different things, but in the end, we can probably agree that in order to create a result, you have to take some action. Think about that, right? That's the only way to create a result. You can't get a result without taking action. So then my next question is, okay, every time you take an action, does it produce a result? And it's interesting because when I ask that from stage, half the group says yes, half the group says no. As we process through that further, though, I think you'll come to the realization that yes, every time you take an action, it produces some sort of result. May not be what you want. In fact, oftentimes isn't what you want, but it produces something. Agreed? Great. Now the next question is, okay, why do you act the way you act? Why do you behave the way you behave? And if you're like me, your spouse asks you that all the time. Why do you do that? Well, there are a host of things that influence the way you behave, aren't there? Lots of things. Everything from my goals and desires to the people I associate with, the culture I'm in, the physical environment I'm in. The weather can influence it. My training, my education, my upbringing, my imprinting. I mean, a lot of different things. All of that stuff, though, ultimately comes together to form, and hopefully you can read my writing, our thinking. So our thinking drives our actions create our results. Ultimately, I'm going to draw an arrow from thinking to results. Ultimately, our thinking creates our results in life. And this is an important framework because it affects every area of your life. And here's the thing. We're pretty conscious of the actions. We're pretty unconscious of the thinking. Yet it's the thinking that's creating the life you're living now, and it's the thinking that'll create the life you want to live in the future. Here's the challenge. For most people, thinking is pretty unconscious. The actions are conscious, the thinking's unconscious. It's a little bit like water to a fish. And yet that's what's creating your current life, that's what's creating your future. And I think it was Maxwell Maltz who said, first to say it anyways, if you do something for 21 days, it becomes habit. And I would argue, I think we've all experienced that from time to time, but we've also experienced times when it doesn't become habit. You do something for 21 days or 21 days, it doesn't become habit, right? So if there's an action that's incongruent with the thinking, we won't stay in a state of incongruency. We revert back to the old action. And I know that's happened for you. And then sometimes we even beat ourselves up emotionally and go, geez, I'm just not disciplined. Well, you're disciplined to your current thinking. When that thinking shifts, everything changes. So the first thing I want you to become aware of is your thinking. Where is your thinking productive? Where does your thinking support where you want to go? And where is it unproductive? Where is it negative? And there's so much in the environment, I think, that is negative, that is unproductive, that comes at us. So if we're not intentional about our thinking, now I don't necessarily believe that you can control what pops in your head, but you can decide and you can choose whether or not you dwell on it, whether or not you give it life, whether or not you expand it. And that's what I'm talking about. Who was it? Out on his name. Earl Nightingale. Decades ago, Earl Nightingale said, you become what you think about. Think about that. A little pun there. Anyways, but the power of that, are you thinking about the person you want to become? In our 12-week year workshops, when we do the vision work, we have people identify the 3 words that best describe their future. Why is that? Because we want you to dwell on that. We want you to think about those concepts. We want you to think about how you want to show up, right? Do you want to be kind? Do you want to be generous? Do you want to be prosperous? Do you want to be loving? If you're going to be that type of person, you've got to dwell on that. There's a verse that says, and I'm going to read it to you here, think about what is true, what is noble, what is right, what is pure, what is lovely, what is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I mean, that's the power of thinking. You become what you think about. The more you dwell on it, the more it becomes a reality. Now, here's what happens for most folks. They get a few minutes of time. Where do they go? They go to that smart device. And what are you looking at? Well, most of it's junk. If we just took some of that time and spent it with ourselves, it's like there's no time for deep thought anymore. There's no time for strategic thought. There's no time for future thought or intentional thought. That's how we begin to shift our thinking. That's how we change our world. Remember, our outcomes are created by our thinking. You want different outcomes? You've got to think differently. The person that has the outcomes you want thinks differently than you do. Whether that's they've got better relationships, they make more money, whatever it is. If you're going to take your performance to a different level, it's got to start with your thinking. And it's not an either or. It's a both and. It's not just thinking, but that's where it starts. And we've all had those experiences where we've had that epiphany, right? That big thought change, if you will, and then everything aligns. Those are pretty rare. Usually what happens is we open up a little space in our thinking and we support it with some new action. And then we start to see a different result, which reinforces the thinking and the action. And it's almost like this graph isn't linear or vertical, it's more circular. But make no mistake, it starts with the thinking. And I think that most of the exposure we have in the world, it pollutes our thinking. It's not the kind of stuff that picks you up, that has you think about you at your best, right? And it's really difficult when you're struggling. I mean, I've had times when I struggle, it's really easy to get fixated on the struggle and the problem, which just magnifies. The more you focus on it, the more it magnifies. So think about this. Do you want to magnify the problem? You want to magnify the struggle? Or you want to magnify the solution and the new ground? That's where it becomes really powerful. It's not just when things are going well, right? Because it's pretty easy to have positive thinking when things are going well. The real challenge is to have that positive, productive thinking when you're struggling, or in areas that maybe aren't doing so well. And so being intentional about that, the setting up some routines in your day. How do you start your day? What's the first thing you do in the morning when you get up? Do you fill your brain with negative images and problems and all kinds of media stuff? I mean, is that where you go? Do you pick up that smart device? Do you turn on the TV? Do you look at the I was with one group, they said the first thing I look at is the T-note, and then I look at the sales report and blah, blah. Don't start there. Think about being intentional about what you fill your mind with, certainly as you start your day and you end your day. Right? Start your day with gratitude. What are you grateful for today? And what are the positive things you want to make happen today? Where do you want to see your life? Those 3 words that describe the future you. Check in with that in the middle of the day. At the end of the day, my wife and I, Judy, we get in bed and the last thing we do is we talk about what's one thing we're grateful for today. And it's just a routine that makes certain that we're thinking about the positive things that we want to become. We're not being gripped by the negative and the problems, because you're always going to have trials. Someone said that a couple thousand years ago, you will have trials. Not maybe, you will. And so how you work through those has a lot to do with your thinking. Is your thinking positive? Is it productive? But make no mistake, it's creating your outcomes. And so some of that thinking's really positive. Some of that thinking's really productive because it's creating what you want. There's other aspects of your thinking that aren't so productive, aren't so positive. And if you have a team, this works collectively as an organization as well. It's the values we hold as an organization. It's the discussions we have. It's the thinking about the current situation we're in and what we're capable of. It works in organizations because organizations are just a collection of people. And so it's the same framework. But I want you to just be more aware of your thinking. and how it's driving the actions. Because if you're struggling to take an action and you know how to do it, it's not a training piece, it's not a skill issue, it's a thinking issue. And we've all had that. We know there's this important action, but it's uncomfortable a little bit, but I know how to do it. I mean, I can demonstrate, I can role play it. Well, at that point, it's not a skill issue, it's not an action issue, it's a thinking issue. And there's something in our thinking that's getting in the way of us consistently taking that action. When we address that, things will change, things will shift, things will get easier. It'll become easier to take that action. So your thinking is really powerful. It's shaping your life. The life you're living today is really based on the thinking that you have, whether you think you have opportunities or whether you think you're limited. I love Henry Ford. He said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's the power of thinking in every area of your life. So be more intentional, right? Don't just let what comes at you fill your mind. Don't let the media, don't let the smart devices, don't let the internet, don't let any of that determine what you're going to think about. Be more intentional about it. And be more intentional about the areas that maybe be most challenging. How can you shift some of that unproductive thinking to more productive thinking? How do you move from, gosh, I feel like this is never going to work, to here's what I want it to look like. And here are some solutions. This is just a problem to be solved. And so focus on the solution, focus on the movement, focus on where you want to be with that outcome, focus on how you want to show up in the situation. Even in the difficult situations, how do I want to show up? If I'm intentional about that from a thinking standpoint, then my actions align with that and the outcomes will come. I hope this has been helpful. We'll talk more about this again. For more on this, go to 12weekyear.com.